Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to my YouTube channel and podcast, Buddhist Biohacker. I am your host and mystic guide, Lisa Gunshore, and it's a good morning when you're jazzed by your own music. And for those of you who don't know, my husband wrote and produced our Buddhist Biohacker song. So I'm just sharing that out. I keep pressing on him to make it a full song and publish it as well. He's a drummer and amazing. And so for those of you who don't know, he made our Buddhist Biohacker song. So we are here today, and I see all of you guys. I already see everybody ticking in to watch. So thank you so much for watching live. We are here today to talk about sacred sovereignty. And you know, what I love about this is that this came up even in Susan Bratton's talk about the feminine sexuality and stepping into that space. And we are joined today by a dear colleague, and I feel a dear, sweet friend and sister and a soulmate of mine, Deeann Liu Mahoney. And she is a medicine woman, a guide, a yoga teacher. She is really amazing, and she is focused on retreats and workshops, ceremonies, anything that awakens the heart and the body and our own sacred remembrance. And so, Deeann, welcome in. I'm so happy to have you here with me today.
Oh, good morning. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. It's so sweet to connect with you.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to this. And just some context for everybody out there. I met Deeann at my Hurricane Mexico yoga retreat a year or so ago now, over a year ago now. And I'm just so grateful to meet you and your sister Deeann and have you in my life. And here we are. So I want to start out, we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. And I think you and I are go with the flow energy together. But I want to start with my very first question I usually ask everyone, especially when you're new to the Buddhist Biohacker community, is, you know, if you were to describe yourself today in the present moment, like, who are you today? What is your mission?
That's a big question. So today I feel like I am in deep transformation and an empty vessel. I have been releasing the masculine mind and the ego that wants to control, manage, certainty, and a lot of fear and scarcity programming that we've been conditioned in. And what I'm intentionally in deep listening and remembrance of are those heart and soul whispers of the divine feminine. She who is, our Mother Earth, it is sacred, so full of love and wisdom, and eternally abundant.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, where do you want to start today? You know, I think, we talked a little bit offline yesterday, and there's so much to talk about because I think a lot of our viewers in the community are interested in plant medicine and how to work with plant medicine. I wonder if we don't start with, like, why would we even seek it out? You know, I think that's kind of an interesting place to start because I've been drawn to plant medicine myself over the years through my clients. And we talked a little bit about this off air, but, just to share some context with you and with the audience, I read a lot of people who are either preparing to go for an ayahuasca journey or are returning from an ayahuasca journey. And I've been blessed to be gifted a lot of my closest clients have left with ayahuasca water. And so I've been blessed with that water. I've connected with some of the ayahuascan shamans in the lucid dream state. So that's my experience. I haven't really delved into it with my genetics. It's super challenging for me to try to do anything. And then, of course, I have vows with the Dalai Lama and all that stuff. So all that to say, I'm drawn to it. I was drawn to talking to you about it. And here we are on the air talking about it. So that was very long-winded. But why do people seek that out? What's the point, right? What's the point of plant medicine, and why are people looking for it?
Yeah, good question. So I think the point and why people seek it out, everybody's different. It's for different reasons. It is not necessarily for everybody, but it is another tool to shift your consciousness, to make the unconscious more conscious. And when you have a slight perspective shift, you sometimes will see things in a different light. And for, like you're naturally a seer. You're already very close to the unseen world. And for those of us that are, there, the opposite of spirit, I work with the medicine wheel. So the opposite of spirit would be body. So it's to be more here embodied, rooted, connected to the earth, present, and tuned into our physical bodies. But what we see in the Western world is most of us are very much in the very physical material and very disconnected from our spirit and our soul path, our guides. And then on the other axis of the medicine wheel is mind. Westerners, we tend to live in our minds. Opposite of that is heart. So we're very disconnected from our hearts. And so each individual, depending on where they are on that wheel, it's like trying to move them more towards center, which is all things in nature just naturally want to seek balance and homeostasis. That's the still point, peace. So that's usually what happens. And, unfortunately, I get some people that have, gone to an ayahuasca ceremony and been re-traumatized because the integration piece is so important. Now that you've had this huge experience, our culture and usually our lifestyles don't support that, where the indigenous tribes in Peru or other places, their whole life is built around preparing them to, look internally versus externally for who they are and why they're on this earth. And then they maybe get one sit with this sacred medicine, and then they spend the rest of the year integrating it. So it's preparation, the event, and then the integration of it. So it's been life-changing for me. My first, and before that, I was doing all the things, overachiever, thought I was succeeding in life. When I realized the overachieving was really a lack of self-worth and feeling I needed to hustle, to prove my worth and value. And then having left, what I consider a pretty successful tech career to actually in search of something more meaningful. And then, my first medicine journey, it felt like 50 years of therapy in a single night. It was so deeply transformational. And why I'm devoted to these medicines, because the thing that I witnessed the most is for quite often, most people, it's the first time they truly, truly feel safe in their body and they feel their own love. Not seeking the external, the surface, or from something outside of themselves, but I just get to experience, they come completely back into that wholeness, that oneness. And then you come out of that experience and there begins the work. How do you bring this into your everyday, ordinary life? And because otherwise, if you keep going to the medicine, it just then becomes another addiction, right?
Right. You're activating me in a couple of areas. I think one of them is just what you're saying about the integration. There are communities here in Colorado that work with, plant medicines and some different things. And I have noticed that the community is drawn to it, and there's a community of people that are going through it, but the integration is lacking. And as a healer, and I know you've done this as well, because this is your work as well. I think it's important for us to name out loud to everybody who's watching right now, like a lot of our work is cleaning up messes from other work that didn't go through an integration process. And that sounds, negative and judgmental, and it really is the truth. So oftentimes I have folks who come to me who've had this profound awakening, and that disillusionment is that tower moment, and then there's no one to hold them after that. Mm-hmm. And that becomes, I would say that to me is the side effect or the cautionary note of plant medicine is you want to work with somebody like you, right? Like you, like me. But if you're going to do this work with plant medicine, especially, you've got to have somebody to partner with to work through what comes up after that experience. I think that's important. And the other thing you're activating in me, and then I'll let you speak to both of these points, but the other thing is, you know, as women, we overfunction. And just like you said, we're all like, I mean, I've run retail stores and multi-unit districts for years, right? So we do all these things. We're out, you know, using computers and we're using our technical brain, our right brain. We're project managing, we're people leading, we're doing all these things. And there's a real draw to flipping the switch and going to the opposite left brain. And I'm just going to sit. I'll use Maui because we were just talking about it. And I went to Maui. I'm going to go sit in Maui and, you know, meditate and like not do anything. I'm not meant to do any of that. And I think that's another caution note for everyone is in the yoga traditions, in the Vedic scriptures, they speak about the balance of both the right and left brain. And the goal, when you read energy, the goal is to look at, is the entire brain activated? It's not about one or the other. And it's not about that pendulum swing. It's about, I spent my morning on my computer working on some film, which is a very right-brained thing. And at the same time, I'm being creative, which is a left brain thing. And so I just think both of those things you touched on, I think it's important for us to talk about the importance of incorporating and integrating, not just integrating after a plant medicine experience, but also integrating both the human experience and the spiritual experience.
Yeah, thank you so much for touching on all of that. Yes, your first point about the integration and having really that support, that container, and it's, you know, there are now integration therapists that are helpful. And the groups that I tend to hold, if they're not one-on-one private, you know, then I walk the person in deeper, but they're in groups and community. So the integration happens in that community and you have multiple people that were there, a part of the witnessing and the experience. So that really starts to help people feel like, we call it soul family, you know, like, because most of us kind of weren't born into the ideal mama and papa. And so here we really find other conscious beings that are working towards really coming back into their own authentic alignment, you know, and here having the environment, the safety, the tools, the experiences, and really the felt sense. And, you know, you talk about yoga. Yoga is really the foundation of all of this. You know, the plant medicine is one tool, but yoga, what is yoga? Union, right? And it comes back to the breath. And you know, to be able, it's the first thing we're given, it's the last thing we leave behind, and it is sacred. Every single life, every single breath is. And you know, so yoga really being the tool and the foundation of that. And so the maps that I kind of see, because it's all energy, everything, all matter is energy, and energy vibrates. And in our physical human beings, you know, we know this from traditional Chinese medicine, from the Vedic scriptures, but the chakras, right? The nadis, the energy centers. I also see the medicine wheel of mind, body, heart, spirit. And then really the you know, the left feminine, the right masculine. We have all of that in us, and it is constantly seeking balance. And so when I'm working with people, typically what I can sense is, you know, I can see the timelines, like what their highest calling is, where they are now, what the blockage is. Sometimes it's physically in the body, sometimes it's a mental or emotional thing, but usually we're generally exhausted because typically, you know, our spirit energetic body is back here, our physical body is here, our mind is even quicker, right? And then our emotional body is somewhere in the middle. And I'm just saying this in general. And so imagine how much work you're not even conscious of having to regulate and go back and forth between all of these. And when they come into alignment, I mean, that is peace. And for most of us who oscillate between this push, vacation, dry, you know, overwork, disconnect, disassociate, go all in, right? It's this, and that's the wounding pattern. So when we come into absolute rooted stillness, you know, I mean, we are naturally beautiful, loving, abundant, creative beings. And it's just to get out of our own way enough so that it can flow through us.
I have a nuts and bolts question for you, for myself and for the audience, which is, what is, like, when you work with people in a group versus individually, like, what's the difference between the two, and why would we want to do one over the other? Like, what does that look like? I mean, obviously, I'm sure part of it's what resonates with the person, but I'm just curious, like, how that works.
Okay, that is a great question. Thank you so much for asking. When I'm speaking to somebody, it's really based on their intention, where they want to go. There are some people that are really wanting community and connection, and I would say group. There are other people that I think are naturally either overly sensitive or caretakers and trackers, and they will be distracted if other people are in a group, or they go into hiding. There is more, it depends on the individual. There's more safety. And that is one thing that I observe too, is I'll see how somebody is one-on-one with me, because there's complete trust and safety, no judgment, and I get to see the real version of them. And then when I put them in a group, I get to see the other, parts that come out. And and it really informs of, I keep going back to authenticity. It's not a performance. Like, you are free to be who you are.
Yeah.
So I think, and if somebody really wants, to go deeper, really deep, say they have a specific intention, something that they want to work through, but for the most part, the reason for the group is because we're relational beings. Everything happens in the relational field, relationship to self, relationship to others.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. Yes. It's funny because I love that you said that, because it's like this little joke I have with my clients who want relationships, but they don't want to go online and they don't want to date. They just think, I want to meet someone organically. And it makes me laugh and giggle, because if you don't, like, go to dating kindergarten, you're never going to get to dating college. And so I just encourage everyone, the relationship piece, you can't know what you want in a relationship if you don't get some of the things you don't want. So there's this, like, experimental journey of figuring out who you are through the relationships with other people, and, identifying patterns and looking at all of those things. I love that you said that. I'm also curious, like, there's so many different kinds of plant medicine at this time. Like, there are so many kinds. I'm in Colorado, so we have a lot of legal plant medicines here. And hi, Danny Marie. Good morning. Welcome in. Definitely, y'all that are watching, like, you can ask questions, please. I'll put them up on the screen. And if you have experiences with plant medicine, or anything that we talk about today, please throw that out there too. We'd love to hear. But yeah, so how do you know, like, when someone wants to work with you, Deeann, how do you know where to start with them? Like, what does that process look like as well? And I'm just putting these really basic questions out, not only because I'm interested, but because I know that a lot of you in the Buddhist biohacker community have shared and asked questions around this topic. So I want to get to the nitty gritty. So if you have questions, throw them out there too. But yeah, so I'd love to hear from you, Deeann. Like, how do you decide what to do? I mean, I've heard so many things, like, I've had all these ayahuasca people. So it's like, oh, she's calling to you. Well, is she, or is it, what is it? So I'm just curious, like, how do you know where to go? Where do you start?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's a really good, like, where to begin and what's the difference, because discernment, which is wisdom, is really important as we navigate this space. And then also where we're headed, because I think where you are, more is becoming legal. So we have to really be able to choose what's best for us. And obviously, ahimsa, non-harming. So we don't want to re-traumatize ourselves. And, first of all, I want to acknowledge that when I talk about plant medicine, it is medicine, and different than a drug. And, and pharmaceuticals are drugs that are actually created on plants. And I think the main difference is intention. Is there an intention to actually heal and do work at the root problem versus Band-Aid and cover over it? And, my journey originally with plants was becoming vegetarian and vegan, and then growing up in Chinese medicine. I mean, all the herbs and right? Yeah, the tinctures, the
Mm.
teas, all of them. So that's a foundation, and that's cool.
I have to jump in and just say, like, I saw Ming was my acupuncturist for years and years, Chinese medicine doctor. And I still have my herb teapot and all my stuff. And like, there's just a smell. Like, there's a smell that is like those Chinese herbs, and your body just starts to crave it, even though it might be awful, but it's 100% you want it at the same time. So I had to interrupt, sorry, but
No, thank you. Jump in, please, because I love that you said that, because half the time when I'm drinking my ayahuasca, I'm laughing because I'm like, I grew up with these nasty, bitter, stinky herbs. Like, I was trained for this. Right?
yes.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. So, Chinese medicine would kind of, can prepare you initially for that. And then just being a little bit more plant-based, because the whole thing is to break the food addictions. They create a lot of blockage and keep us not open and clear to receive, right? So there is a whole dieta when you're preparing for like ayahuasca, but I put the medicines on a spectrum, right? On one end, you have the homeopathic, like, all the herbs that we cook with, yeah, the teas that we take, the tinctures. My favorites are actually all the mushrooms. They are the longest living species. Their mycelium has grown in the earth with the bones and the wisdom of our ancestors. And I believe, and what do? They naturally connect. So that's why I'm a big fan of all the mushrooms, and they're, super immune boosting, rewire neural pathways,
Yeah.
open the heart. And just a thing that I tend to notice is when I have microdosed mushrooms, I feel I can instantly connect with other people that are also mushrooms. I'm like, oh, the mushrooms in my heart want to connect with the mushrooms in them, right? Like, it's that mycelial web. So, which is also aligned with the yoga, right? The union. And, right now my prayers have been around more unity, more wholeness for all of us. Internally first, and then we radiate that out externally. So the things that are legal right now, obviously working with those, and then the things that are not legal yet, I which also is a little bit silly to me, because they have been used for hundreds of years in indigenous cultures and tribes. And like Chinese medicine, there isn't the data, the science. We just know that it's been working, right? And now the data and the science is catching up. But I believe that we believe what we feel and experience for ourselves, which is why we're moving towards these medicines. And the reason the medicines are coming to light is because we're moving away from what I've seen as the triangle, having a few people at the top, the gurus, the teachers, being here, tell me, I'll follow you. And now we're coming into more of a feminine like circle, where we're realizing we're our best teacher, we're our best healer. So how do we tune into these? And the plants are now being made available and accessible, because before it used to be the shaman would take the plant and you would sit with them and they would interpret and translate it. But now we have access, but we also haven't trained and prepared our bodies, our lives for it. And one of my biggest disclaimers is, because, my first journey, it shows you everything that is out of alignment. And if you are attached to your job, your relationship, your lifestyle, all of these things, it can be, a very transformational, but also not easy. And a lot of grief comes with leaving, the places and spaces that you've outgrown. So I start with the legal ones. Microdosing, psilocybin is one of my favorites. There's a stack that Paul Stamets patented for neurogenesis. And Kanna. Kanna is a South African succulent. They call it nature's MDMA. It's a heart opener.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I have therapist doctor friends who have MDMA. I know ketamine's coming on board and all these other ones. And I tend to be more connected to nature. And when I dig deeper about why ketamine, why MDMA and these other ones versus psilocybin and these natural occurring plants aren't coming online, it's usually because they're trying to create it in a lab and monetize it, you
Yeah.
know. So I tend to be more of a purist, so I stay with what the plants are. And my teacher came to the US and saw that we need more heart and we need more community. And so these medicines are much more feminine in nature. There's 50 something different combinations of them, everything from kanna to like orchid, lily,
Mm.
all the way to, a particular blend of mushrooms and ayahuasca. And quite honestly, I think most people are not prepared enough to sit with pure ayahuasca. I've heard it is because it completely, especially if you are somebody that has not had a psychedelic experience and holds on to control. And so when your entire reality is gone, and then and you're not in your body half the time. And then after the experience, you don't know what happened. You come back into your body. You have no idea how to integrate and process that.
Mm-hmm.
So for less is more, less is more. I'm like, just a little bit to shift your perspective, because the same thinking that got you here isn't going to get you out of here.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So and how the thing that I teach the most is for people to, we live in a culture where we're taught to listen to everybody outside of ourselves,
Yeah.
parents, teachers, right? And so really it's the balance of having time and space to really hear yourself, to come back into your own alignment, and then also being in connection with others. That's really the balance. And then the real secret is each of us are born with this beautiful gift, and when we discover it, that gift is why we're here. It's what wants to be witnessed and shared with the world. That's it.
Mm. I love that. That's a great segue, kind of shifting from all these nuts and bolts of everything, which I think is important. So I think everyone out there, again, if you have questions, throw them down. But I think it's important to understand the process and how to prepare for the process. But I do want to shift more into the consciousness and
Wait, let me add one thing, because
oh yeah, do it.
just to answer your question. So when I'm working with people, I can intuitively sense and feel what's happening where, but then I also need to teach them to be able to listen and track in their body. So I teach them how to muscle test and read their bodies yes and their bodies no. And it's usually like a council of the three of us, like, okay, what are you feeling? This is what your body's saying. And if you would like my reflection, and then they get to choose. It's a
Mm,
choose your own adventure.
I love it. I love it. And that goes into the feminine
Mhm.
piece, the intuition, the feminine flow, consciousness, and also this idea of sacred sovereignty. I really love Susan Bratton did this discussion about sexuality, and she was talking about our sovereignty. And I think, what does sacred sovereignty mean to you? Like, what is sacred sovereignty? And deeper is, what is sacred feminine sovereignty? Because I think that's actually different.
Okay, let's break it down, because each of those hold a lot of charge and a lot of meaning, right? So, what is sacred? I believe that all life, everything is sacred, and it is our love and our devotion, to that which we value,
Mm.
is what we treat as sacred. Um, you wove sensuality in there, and then that popped off for me. A big piece of that is the reclamation of that, because the original goddess was, and there's a book on this called The Sacred Prostitute. She It used to be, in times of war, they would have these goddess temples on the outskirts of villages. The men would go to war. And before they were allowed to re enter community and society, though the sacred prostitutes, the goddess, would bathe them, would feed them, would just wash away all of the war and the aggression, and so that they were safe enough to come back to their homes and their families and reintegrate into society. We have lost that. We see that aggression playing out right now all over.
Yeah.
uh,
Well, and you
yeah.
see that story being replayed, especially in our Western films, with the brothels. There's so many scenes, whether it's a Clint Eastwood movie or a comedy about the Wild West, where the cowboy is coming off of his long ride to come and bathe and have sex and be connected and have a whiskey or whatever. And so take that for what you will, but I agree with you. There's something about, we have a place here in Denver called the Soiled Dove. And it was like a venue for bands. And it actually now is a circus of all things. But when you look up the definition of the Soiled Dove, when you talk about the sacred prostitute, I think of that same energy. I think there's an energy to that all throughout our history, and even in our pioneer days of the West, of women being these caretakers and nurturers when the male energy needs that most. So anyway, go on. I love that.
Yeah. No, and so we learn from history, right? So it's almost also going back to, there was a time and a place where I believe that women were free, free to walk on this earth unharmed, safe in their wholeness. And then somewhere along the line, the patriarchy, which really is just in men and female, so it's non-gender, right? It's that need to have power and control, dominion over another, right? And then women became divided as property, and then when the witches, right, the witches, which is really another word for the wise women, when they had their light and their power, they knew how to heal the body, they knew how to create, apothecaries. And then it was like the men didn't understand that because they couldn't control, manage, and maintain it. So there was this, fear, because, we control, when we're in fear. And we also fear that what we can't control. So it goes both ways. And then there's this division and separation and hiding. And so there we're seeing that, for the first time in many years, we are making our own money. We're able to reclaim our truth. There's a system that now kind of we're rising, and I see that, and it's this big collective awakening in the feminine being the emotional body, and that's in men and women. Like the men now are also, like they were raised being told, that being a man looked a certain way and they couldn't have feelings, and and now it's a complete 180. So it's, like it really is, for me, quite exciting and beautiful, and a massive awakening, to see it come back into balance. That's really what it is. And I'm like, it's not about blame, shame, guilt. It's really leaving the old paradigms of fear, scarcity, and separation behind, to step into, this new earth energy that is, unconditionally loving, universally abundant, and that we're all connected, so that we don't, we realize that karma, we cannot outrun and escape karma. What we do to another brother and sister, we're really doing to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
What we've done to the earth is a reflection of how we treat the feminine.
Yes. Have you read Witches, Midwives, and Nurses?
No.
Oh my gosh, you got to read that book. Witches, Midwives, and Nurses. It's by, it's on my shelf right now, by Barbara Ehrenreich. And it was actually written as more of a political, like, pamphlet years and years and years and years and years ago. But it really is, it's beautiful. It's a great book. So for everybody out there, but it talks about what you're talking about, Deann, which is this, the feminine they were the healers. The witches, the midwives, and the nurses were the healers, and they did things naturally. And when the masculine came in, they started pulling babies out with forceps and cutting things off, right? It's a very, I go around and around and around on the fact that Buddhist biohacker has stuck, but it's really biotransformation is the feminine. Biohacking is the masculine energy. It's really, it's not the same energy. So I've gone around and around, but it's stuck. So my name is here forever. But I just want everyone to know, I do not enjoy the biohack word anymore, because it's really about co-creating with your biology. It's not about hacking it, right? It's a very different thing. And the masculine energy, the imbalanced masculine energy, by the way, imbalanced masculine energy will cut the arm off rather than figure out how to heal the arm.
That's right.
Where the feminine energy, and in feminine form, that's why I went to Shakti school, the feminine form Ayurveda is also not about all of these like prescriptions and details. Feminine form is about looking at what is behind the dis-ease and how do you heal that. And I think it's important it ties into the plant medicine conversation, because if you haven't looked at what's behind your dis-ease or where you feel unsettled in your life, I can't speak from direct experience, but I can imagine that the plant medicine is going to show you what's behind it. So if you're not ready to see that, and you're not ready to make love to that, then, even with the parasites, I could have been angry at my parasites. I could have been grossed out by having parasites. I could have had all these things. And instead I sang to my parasites. That's the divine feminine, like you're talking about. That's the sacred feminine sovereign nature. And the sovereignty, let's get into that. Like, what's your thoughts about sovereignty today? Because we're on a slave planet. It's impossible to be sovereign in so many ways. Like, you can go down 1,000 rabbit holes about how to be sovereign, everyone. And I just remember that book with the man who was in the Jewish concentration camp. Like, it's about your mind. You're not necessarily ever going to free, everything. So I'm just curious what your definition of sovereignty is at this time.
So sovereignty is the latest evolution from safety, freedom, liberation into sovereignty. Mm-hmm. It is that I belong unto myself, right? I am not enslaved to anything, anyone outside of myself, whether it's a person, a system, right? That's really what it is. Mm-hmm. That I am whole and abundant, and I reclaim my birthrights, the right to be free, to be safe, to love, to be creative, fully alive and expressive, and to share, or not share if that's what I'm choosing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's and what I really, it's interesting because I've been reflecting on my path. And I used to work with a lot of very high level, C-level executives, because I thought they're at the top. They hold a lot of the money and the power. And if I can guide them into coming into the heart and shifting their consciousness, they can affect massive change, in the people they touch, in their companies, their organizations, families. And I've pivoted a little bit recently towards, because when I work with younger people, especially couples before they birth, man, the children that they are, raising, and the way that they are parenting, it is so different than the older generations. And what I am seeing is that this system is built on the oppression and the silencing and the separation of many people. And so when and we're seeing this right now on the world stage, when we come together and we start speaking our truth, living into the alignment of our truth. And so this is that a collective awakening that is, for me, is really exciting right now. And the medicine, for people that have been on the medicine path, I will just say we've been preparing for it, because how many transformations have we gone through? I can't tell you how many times I've walked away from the relationship, the career, all the things that, the homes, the spaces that just aren't in alignment anymore.
Yeah, agreed. Attention and intention, right? And, I agree. And it's why, as much as I'd love all the views, it's why I've stayed away from continuing my journey with world predictions. It's why I've stayed away from current event topics as a psychic medium. I feel like defiant, like against following that path. And it doesn't mean I don't have opinions, and it doesn't mean I haven't foreseen things and all of that. But I just want to share with you and with everybody here, it's why I won't do it. Because if we give the power to the polarized, divisive messaging, even if we give the power to discerning what's true and what's not true, we're still handing that power over, and we're not really focusing on what matters, which is our own work,
That's right.
And it goes back to what Gandhi spoke of so many times. Like, what we do as individuals ripples out and affects everyone. And focusing on what all this other stuff is out here just puts the focus out here on all of them. And if we don't want them to have power, then why are we talking about it?
That's right. It's also looking at how we are aligning our time, our money, our energy with what we value.
Yes.
That is what we're being shown. What do we value, and how do we come into alignment with ourselves? Because we've kind of been asleep, trusting, that mom would do this, dad would do this, the government would care for, and we're, it's the thing that I am sharing with most people, especially the younger generations, is, can they really learn to hear and trust their own soul truth?
Mm-hmm.
And can they discern, right? Have the wisdom piece to hear when somebody else is actually truly reflecting their soul back to them, or when they're projecting their own fears and agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, because truth and lies, we're going to go into this chaotic time where all of a sudden we might not know which is what. And it's moving so quickly, energetically, right? Astrologically. And this has been a big unwiring for me, because when I was in my masculine, tech persona, I could see the end game, and then I'd reverse engineer and make that thing happen. Right now, spirit has not given me that. I get little pieces, but she's training me to be so present in my body and in my heart, and move moment to moment, that I don't have anything planned out. I don't know where I'm going to be from one moment to the next, so that I can be in deep conversation and listening. It's a very different orientation, and most people, it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
We like certainty. We like control.
Yes.
I do. I used to, and here I am in total trust and surrender. And that, again, is a very feminine movement.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Because I watch the mind tries to, when we know that this thing is happening, the mind turns on and comes on board trying to control that. And then we lose the heart and the presence.
Yes. Yes. And I find for all of us who have intuition, which I believe everybody's psychic, I say that all the time, we all have muscles. We're not all triathletes, but we all have pineal glands, and we all know how to use them. But I think I think what happens is, when we sense that something's off, we almost get even more hooked into the story or the narrative or the character or the person because we're trying to figure out what's not right there. And to your point, Deeann, not only is it moving quickly, I think there's going to be a lot of flip-flopping back and forth with stories. And that is typical of a sociopathic nature. So I think it's really important for everyone to hear what you're saying, which is go back to, you said a great self-inquiry question. What are my values? Mm-hmm. Start there. What do you value? I went on this tangent the other day for one of my daughters, my stepdaughters. And I realized my husband actually was the mirror who reflected it back. He said to me, I never realized how much you valued education and learning until now, because I was going on this rant about it. And it really shifted my vibration in the last like 2 weeks since that conversation, because it was like, wow, I really do. That's why I want to teach. That's why I'm constantly practicing self-inquiry, right? The learning and the education piece. So asking this question that you brought up, Deeann, what are my values? Like, who can even define that for themselves? I think what a great thing to journal about this week is, what do you value? And then filtering where you're spending your time through what you value. Because if what you value is community and education and feminine energy, then devoting your time to the media narratives or, you know, the drama down the street or whatever it is, isn't necessarily the place you want to spend your time and energy. And, oh, I love this. Mbutes here. Good mornings. Good conversation. Big hug to you both. Oh, I can't wait to have you on the show as well. Another incredible divine feminine energy. So yeah, I think that's like an exclamation point on that, Deeann, with the values. What a huge point to bring up today is, and I wonder too, I'm just wondering how our values align us too with work with our consciousness, work with plant medicine, work with our spiritual nature. Like those values are intertwined with all of that as well.
Yeah. So no, thank you for talking about that, because it is really coming into integrity, which is integration, and the authentic alignment at the core is what we value. From there, then, you know, I've been stalking my thoughts because I am letting go of this fear and separation programming. So anytime that comes on board, I won't let myself think it. I won't let myself speak it. I won't let myself act out of that. Right. So that's the ripple effect. And then then that's our energy, our focus, and then our time and our money too, because those are other ways, right, that we can really influence. Yeah. So yeah. I had to, yeah, just jump in with that piece. And yeah. And if you're doing it right, it's a lot of work to be that present, that conscious and aware, moment to moment, because most of the time we're running, you know, on autopilot, old programs.
Absolutely. Well, and it goes back to the safety piece you talked about as part of being sovereign, is when we feel safe, it's easier to make the tough decision.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important when you're in safety, then you can trust, then you can surrender, then you can make the tough decision that goes against the grain, because it's not an easy way to live. I've always been anti-authority and anti-program my whole life. In fact, as a kid, I hated Mickey Mouse. I still do, by the way, but I hated Mickey Mouse and my mom could not figure it out. And it's only recently that I'm like, this is probably why I hated Mickey Mouse. But the point is, for me, I've always been in this outsider space. And what I'm working on, Deeann, is shifting from not belonging and being the outsider to acknowledging that I was really in my own space of sovereignty, trusting my own intuition. And just because it didn't go with the group doesn't mean I don't belong. And so that's an interesting journey and another side of it to go through.
Yeah, no, I love that you talked about that, because Brene, Brown touches on that, right? Braving the wilderness, about how we all have this deep desire for connection and belonging, but it's really all belonging to oneself, which is the sovereignty piece. And I've been spending more time alone, and I'm like, wow, is this loneliness, or is this alone? And I've shifted alone to that is the step to becoming all one with myself. So from alone to all one. And it's to really be able to, there's a lot of fear and static and noise right now. And we have to really be diligent about blocking it out, because it's almost like we're being silently programmed and brainwashed.
Yes, very much so. And if you can believe it, time flies. It's already been almost an hour. It's crazy. I feel like there's at least 3 more episodes out of this episode. So more to come with Deeann. And I also think, wouldn't it be fun to have a sacred sexuality conversation with you and me and Katie Silcox, who leads the tantric path, and Susan, who does all this work with the sexual body. So anyway.
Yes,
yes. Oh my gosh.
Can I share one more thing? Because this is also what, Goddess has been really teaching me is, turning it internal. And because what we value, if we are that, nobody can take that away from us. And it's independent of people, external people, circumstances, situations. So if I am love, I will be tested to not be that. Right. And and then trying to find safety in a home. I'm like, nope, I need to find safety in this body, and then I'll attract and magnetize the ideal home, not the other way around. We know that's the law of manifestation and attraction, right? We attract what we energetically are.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love you so much. Now you have your IG up here. So for everybody who's on Instagram, you can find Deeann at Girl. But Deeann, how can folks connect with you and find you?
Okay, so it's Girl with a 0. I'm on Instagram, and quite honestly, I don't have a website. I have Facebook and Instagram, and then I would say email me. I kind of do this work as I'm guided, and it hasn't been super public facing yet, because of some of the nature of the work that I do. But email, phone number, I'll drop it into the comments. Yeah.
Perfect.
At Gmail.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I love you so much. Thank you to everybody who's been joining. I so appreciate you. And we will be back. I believe we're back next week, and it might be with Ombute. We also have a really cool conversation with Denise Maple and Suzanne Hunt about the empath and the endocrine system continued. So we're going to get into the thyroid next week. So that's going to be a great show too. And if you're following us with the Northern Exposure, please continue to binge watch, because we're going to talk about season 5 and the occult symbolism in that show, which I could go on and on about. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Deeann. I love you so much. Everybody have a really, really great day.